DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Let's turn our attention to what was going on overseas, because there's a hell of a lot of rugby on the weekend. Tony Johnson with us from Sky Sport, calling it in Dunedin. So, in no particular order, we've got the Wallabies-Fiji. I loved watching that game yesterday, a cracking game. New Zealand Māori playing Scotland. Again, it was a fantastic second half. I saw the second half of that. The Boks versus Italy. Lions against New South Wales. Let's go straight to the opponent that we're all looking at come September, the Springboks against Italy. They played one match against the Barbarians, which is a cobbled together side that's more of a social kind of outing. So we've seen them play twice now. What are you gleaning from watching them? They put 40 points on Italy. Again, I don't know whether it's a B or a C team or whatever it is. So, but you're just looking at the Springbok performance like we'd look at the All Black performance.
Yeah, not a B team, Italy. I think they were missing some big names or some regular starters, but I don't think it really matters. Look, the Springboks are a terrific side at the moment. They are the best.
You talk about the French having, sorry to interrupt you, Tony, you talk about the French having 40 or 50 players. This team has got 40, 50 players, haven't they? What
I like is the way they've expanded their game. You think about the team that the All Blacks were having so much difficulty beating, say, around 2008, 2009, and it was based on a huge forward pack and a really good kicking game by one of the masters, one of the best field kicking or out-of-hand kicking halfbacks the game's ever seen, Furi de Prea. And they chased and they sweated on mistakes, and if you made a mistake, they punished you. This is different. This is a Springbok team that has expanded its attacking parameters. They have bought back the little winger.
He is just brilliant to watch. He's just brilliant, isn't he? They're stepping and the pace and the stopping and the acceleration and things.
They can create something out of nothing. It's a lethal back three. So if you're going to kick to them, then you'd better kick the ball into the right places, because if not, you're inviting them to rip you up. I think the influence of Tony Brown is in there. You can
a lot of
see
comments about you calling out Tony Brown. A lot of comments from the Bok fans saying it's not just him, but
I'm not going to say it's just him. Of course it's not just him, and I never would. But it's worth acknowledging that this is part of the vision that Rassie Erasmus... God, they're so sensitive.
You Bokke fans are sensitive.
But I love the Springboks. I love, playing rugby in South Africa. It's one of the great joys I've ever had in my life. Please, if you say something mildly critical or not critical, but that you don't agree with, you don't get up in arms about it. I'm just saying that this is part of Rassie Erasmus's vision to expand the parameters.
Well, it just gives them more ammo, doesn't it? This is what it does.
And who better to bring in than a guy like Tony Brown, who's always been known for his just thinking a little bit outside the square, his vision, and it's working a treat. So they're a fantastic side. They're going to be so hard to beat when the All Blacks play them later on in the year. And they've taken, as I say, that they've still got all the core things that have made them formidable in the past, but they've added to it.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, New South Wales. Did they find the right recipe to upset that particular Lions side, or was it just an off night from a side that were just racking up 50-point scores against teams?
Oh, the conditions were tricky. They struck a gnarly opposition. There were a few accusations made. I don't know whether they were being made.
No, there was actually a cyclone, Tony. I think there was
actually a Noah's Ark type of deluge earlier on in the week, I think there is a bit of a drainage issue there that they've got to deal with. So that didn't help. I just think the Waratahs, who, let's face it, I don't think anyone was expecting great things from them. They just muscled up.
Most of us were expecting them to get belted by 70 or 80.
Yeah.
So...
maybe just a couple of question marks over the Lions just might take them back. It might have been a step forward, half a step back. I still think they're going to go into the series. I've got them slight favourites to win the series now.
Have you seen anything from the Lions so far that you could say, I'm going to pick that 23 that's going to play the test? Like, do you think you know who they are?
Well, there's a couple of guys that have really put their hand up. I think Finn Russell has definitely put his hand up to be the number 10.
Yeah.
He's just so creative.
And who's the number 8 with the headband who's just bloody...
Well, no, you think of Pollock.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he's outside the square talking of
Well, he could be 6,
things.
7 or 8, isn't he?
I think they've got to chuck him in there.
Yeah, they have to, Well, they've been talking about how good he is.
Well, you go back to, and I saw some vision of it the other day, of a series that the Lions in Australia played, I 1989.
No, it was at the Campo series,
And,
mate. Yeah.
well, it was. I mean, David Campese and Greg Martin,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
old mate Greg Martin,
Yep.
and still blaming each other.
Yeah.
I'm in Marto's camp over there, by the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You should never be passed to me, mate.
Yeah. But no, one of the things that sort of laid a marker for the Lions back then was that Robert Jones was up against Nick Farr-Jones. Now, Nick was probably the best halfback in the world at the time, and Robert Jones was like a dog on a postman the whole series, and he just got in his face and shoved him and pushed him and racked him up a bit. And I think Pollock's the guy that can probably do that, because not only has he got some talent, look, he's got weaknesses in his game too. His defence isn't great. Going backwards, we don't really know what he's capable of. Going forward, though, he's phenomenal. But he'll get in their face, he'll rack them up, he'll wind the crowd up. I wonder whether Andy Farrell's brave enough, chuck him in there and see. But they've got lots of good options.
Okay. Aussie-Fiji. And look, the Aussies got away with it in the end. It wasn't hugely impressive. They'll be delighted and they'll be really relieved that they got that win, because it would have been such a setback with the series coming. I mean, what did you read into Australia, what you saw, and that team? How close is that to the team that might play the Lions?
I think Joe Schmidt probably summed it up, and he was brave enough to say this publicly. I'd still think there's probably a little lack of self-belief in there with the Wallabies. That the confidence that you normally expect from Australian sports teams in any code.
Yeah, great call. Good call.
Isn't quite
You're right.
to go on with the job. They started well, but once Fiji got a roll going, there were times where they were floundering. As I say, that TMO try that got ruled out, and to me, yeah, the guy did put a foot on the line. It should have been picked up at the time. They're not always those things. And again...
Well, you saw one at North Harbour, the Blues and...
Well, yeah, and I think the way our officials, and when I say our officials, I mean in Super Rugby, are thinking, play it out and then go back. So let the try be scored or let something happen and then go back and revisit it. And I'm not sure at times whether that's a bit counterproductive. So we saw this fantastic try that they scored, and you go back because one of the Australian players has put his foot on the touchline. As I said, what I'm thinking is that if it's the opposition who've made the mistake and you're going back that far, then it shouldn't be factored into the decision.
Yeah, totally.
And that's something that World Rugby can take a look at, because we've gone back to that looking for reasons not to award tries. So, but once Fiji got a roll going, and Mata, I thought, had a fantastic game at number 8. The props like Ravai get rolling forward, Ikanaveri, and then their backline, Tuisova, was an absolute force in the middle of the park, which makes me think that I'd still love to see Karevi in the Australian mix there somewhere. So plenty to work on, but I think maybe it's the mental side of it that's going to be the big challenge for Joe Schmidt. They've had a rough time of it in recent years, the Wallabies. Strike rugby in Australia generally, they need an injection of confidence, which means that the first test is going to be so important. If Australia wins the first test, then they win the series.
All on. Yeah, she's all on. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they need to really to make this. If the Lions win the first one, I think they win the second one.
And the third one becomes almost irrelevant. Excuse me. So that was the thing that really struck me about that game, was that they got themselves into a winning position. But once they lost the momentum, once it went back to Fiji, and Fiji started playing rugby as only they can. I thought Salesi Rayasi had a really good game at fullback too. Gosh, he's got a talent, that guy. And he's a great injection, following on from his father, of course, who was a Fiji international. I'm looking forward to seeing them play against Scotland. Actually, as it happens, Martin, I'm going up to Suva.
Right, you are. You're going to be calling that game. So let's finish on that, because Scotland against New Zealand Māori. And as I say, I tuned in for the second half of that game, and New Zealand Māori were down to 13, I think, at that stage. I think Zahn Sullivan came off the field. No, Balin came off the field, and they're down to 13. Scotland scored a try, and it blew out to 29 to something rather. And then I went and got a cup of tea or a beer, probably it was, and then came back, and all of a sudden it got really close, and it was 26-29 at the end, and it was
just a great game.
Hell of a finish. Yeah, it was. It was just one of those games where you come off thinking, I don't really care who wins actually this game. I'm just really glad I'm watching it.
Well, you know you're going to get a good game, and I love the idea that they played that in Whangarei. They've made some fantastic efforts in Northland. The stadium, and it's a big punt to build a stadium like that, and they've invested in that stadium. It's a great stadium. It's always been a wonderful place to watch rugby.
Well, it used to be
Okara Park.
Okara Park, that's right.
And they had the massive goalposts that sort of went halfway up to the sky, and the bank would be full for a game against the Lions. And I'll never forget the World Cup game that I did up there was Canada were playing Tonga, and it was just a fabulous day. So great place to have it. It's spiritually too, but also, the connections that Northland Rugby have made with their community. I think they deserve a lot of reward for that. So it was great to see the game played there. Ideal place to have it. It's a really good surface there. Māori All Blacks played some terrific rugby, but Scotland, when you consider they had a number of good players away with the Lions,
of course.
That's a good side. And this is a really important match that they've got coming up against Fiji, because of the world ranking points, which are going to be a factor later on in the year when they do the draw for Rugby World Cup. And why did I see that Hong Kong have qualified for the Rugby World Cup?
What? Have they?
Yeah.
Have they?
Yeah, because it's an expanded competition.
Oh, okay, right.
Anyway, getting back to the Scotland, I think they just had the structure, but the talent there as well to get the job done. It was a good win for them, but more importantly, it was just a terrific game of rugby, a great occasion, and I'm looking forward to another one, Suva, this Saturday afternoon. I think it's about a 2:30 kickoff, Scotland against Fiji. Scotland team in form. Fiji will, even though they lost in the end by the narrowest of margins to Australia, they'll be greatly fired by that. This is just going to be a fantastic occasion.
As Brendan Telfer said to me when we first started Radio Sport, you're going up, it reminds me of this, you're going up to Fiji to call this game. It's not the best job in the world, Martin, but it sure beats working.
That's for real.
DSPN.